Let me tell you a story. In 2009, a journalist called Rob Walker, he wanted to carry out a study and he wanted to show how powerful good storytelling was. What he did was he bought 200 items and they all averaged in price from about 50 cents up to $1. And he bought them on eBay and he wanted to prove that if you add a beautiful story to the items, you could increase the value of these items. So once he had the items, he went and found 200 authors and he told the authors, I'm going to engage you into a beautiful story and I'd like you to write something for this item, and this study will actually show us how we can improve the value from this story. So after he had the 200 items and the 200 authors, what he did next was he put the items back onto eBay. All of these items are on eBay with this beautiful story, and you know what? Something very interesting happened. He managed to sell the item, which you can see here is a little monkey. It's about the size of my hand. He bought that for 50 cents, but he actually sold it for £131. That was actually $41, sorry. It was an increase of 8,000%, so you could say that was quite a good turnaround. But was this a one-off? No. He actually managed to buy all the products, the items, for $131, but in the end, with the beautiful stories, he sold them for $8,000. Now that is a 6,000% increase. Interesting, isn't it? Now, what's even more interesting is when we go to the movie, we've all been to the movie, let's take something engaging like James Bond or Jason Bourne. You notice when you see these films, some people really engage into the film, whether it's an action movie, a romantic movie, it could even be a true story, but we find ourselves in the cinema really engaging with the movie. With James Bond, you find that some people, especially guys, they might start watching it and really sort of emulating, wanting to be James Bond. They really get into the character and they think, oh, I like how smooth he is. I like how he gets all the girls. I want to be like Bond. I want to act like Bond. I am Bond. And something interesting happens when we leave. We actually find ourselves leaving the cinema and remembering everything that we've heard from that beautiful story the film's told us. And before you know it, you actually find yourself going into a shop and buying an £8,000 Omega watch. Or even, just to be Bond, you can go into a cocktail bar and you're drinking a martini, shaken, not stirred. But it's very interesting how this happens. But the most beautiful story of all is actually when we look at a study that was done by PQ Media. $11.5 billion was actually made from product placement. Think about that. When you've seen a movie, notice how products inadvertently are put into the movie. It could be like a commercial even. If you've watched an advert or read an article, you notice the products, and every product has a beautiful story attached to it. And what happens is that engages with the cortex in your mind and you end up buying the product. It's very interesting. It's an emotional investment that we have with our lives. But the most amazing, beautiful investment that we have is falling in love. We've all been there, yeah? This resembles a love story. Do you remember falling in love? Some of us, how you felt, what you did. Do you remember that feeling you got, the uncontrollable emotion that goes all the way through your body? But what happens is, when we meet someone for the first time, those little things that you look at them and how they eat with their mouth open, but they've got beautiful eyes. Or how they slurp on that straw, but they've actually got a sense of humour. You fall in love with all these endearing qualities, but what happens is our mind goes on a vacation. And about 13 months later, it comes back from its vacation, and suddenly, biochemically, we fall out of love. I mean, it doesn't happen to all of us. Some of us continue and go with the path. But what is actually going on is we start to see things in a different way. And what's happened is dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins have all sort of combined together and sort of created all sorts of chaos in the way that we think. And we start to see things irrationally. And when our mind comes back, suddenly, with all these dopamine levels increasing, we actually suddenly realize, what is that noise? Why are you slurping with a straw? What are you doing? Before you know it, you start questioning yourself. Why has my life become like this? Who am I? Why am I here and where are my friends? It's interesting how judgment can be changed by storytelling and these emotions, these hormones. But what I want to do is I want to show you that dopamine, oxytocin and endorphins all act together to create an emotion in our mind. And I'm going to show you, I want to tell you a story, and I'm going to induce all three hormones into your body. Now I need your consent for this, so if you don't want to play along, I suggest you cover your ears because I'm really going to throw those emotions at you now. So let's start with dopamine. What this means, I'm going to increase your focus, your motivation, your memory. So what does it feel like? So, 8 years ago, let me tell you, I used to work for Sir Richard Branson. I was part of his Virgin Empire, and I used to run a very successful venue that he had in Kensington called the Roof Gardens. Now, I was there for just under 4 years, and in that 4 years, I was very successful. I don't mind saying so myself, but I put a lot of money onto the revenue, our profits went up, and I kind of changed the whole look and feel of the venue. And one day my phone rang, and it was a lady called Sarah, who was Sir Richard's PA. She goes, Matt, I had met Richard before. She goes, Richard wants you to come to Necker Island. He wants you to actually come and talk to him about next year's plans for the roof gardens. He's really excited to hear what you've got to say. So I'm looking at my phone going, Necker Island, okay. So I thought, okay, yeah, when do you want me to go? Next week. All right, right, okay, put the phone down before I could say anything else. And so I thought, okay, well, what I need to do is do a presentation. I need to tell him about my exciting new ideas, how we'd save money. And I rehearsed this presentation over and over in my head. I'm flying out to the Caribbean, and as I flew closer to the Virgin Isles, I started to see the beautiful seas, the palm trees. And when you go to Necker, you actually have to get a little boat that takes you there, and it's the most beautiful, idyllic island. When you get closer to it, really, you go, wow. Am I really here? You can see why people fall in love with the island. So as the boat pulled up, I'm looking at this big house and the trees and the white sands. I'm going, I am here. I was pinching myself. It's like we're still rehearsing my presentation over and over in my head. And I can see Sarah walking towards me across the beach. And she goes, Matt, just one thing. Just got to tell you, it's good to welcome to Necker. Just got to tell you something. Richard's really looking forward to seeing you, but he's got some guests with him. And I went, oh, right, okay. And I'm thinking it obviously must be some directors or something. He goes, and I said, who is it? And he goes, well, it's Beyonce and Jay-Z. There's Prince Harry. He's there with Holly and Sam, his children. And also Jimmy Carr, the comedian. And I just went, what? And he goes, don't worry, Richard's already told them you're coming here to talk about the roof, and they're really excited to hear your story. And suddenly, my life just stopped. I was thinking, shall I fake a death? Shall I just faint, pretend that I've forgotten where I am? Because I was thinking, how the hell am I going to make an interesting story out of profit and loss, how we've saved money on glassware, and how my vision for changing and improving next year's forecast is by saving money on this and that. How the hell am I going to entertain Beyonce with this? And more enough, how am I going to make Jimmy Carr laugh, who can actually go into arenas with 20,000 people? And I had all that anxiety hit me. The heart was racing, my sweat was pouring off my face. And I literally forgot my name. I'm walking, and it seemed forever before I got to that house. Just about before I got to the door, Sarah comes over to me and she goes, Matt, just one more thing. And I went, what else can this woman tell me? I mean, she literally just put my earth and my world at an end. And I turned around and I said, what is it? And wouldn't it be interesting if I didn't tell you what happened next? Well, that's what I'm going to do for the sake of this experiment, because you know what? That is how I tell a story. And what I did there is I really sort of gave you full dopamine. I engaged you into the story. You really wanted to be there. In a way, you'd visualized it. You felt it. You felt everything I was saying, and I got you up to a cliff edge, and then I stopped. Annoying, isn't it? But every story doesn't need to be like that. But to release endorphins in people, dopamines in people, it's as simple as telling a beautiful story. Now, you don't need to have the cliffhanger. It's just a story that engages the person you're talking to. So now, you ready for another one? Oxytocin. If that's okay, you're now going to become more generous. You're going to trust me. And you're going to bond with every word that I say. So, 9 months ago, there was a little boy called Charlie. He was my godson, well, he still is actually. He was a beautiful kid, and obviously I knew him from a little baby. And he used to really look up to me. I used to spend pretty much every other weekend there as my best friend's kid. And Charlie was really looking forward to having a new brother and sister. He was 10 months into a pregnancy, and they kind of knew that there was a cesarean coming up. But Charlie was saving up all his pocket money. He was really excited. He was even choosing the wallpaper for the nursery. Now, we didn't know whether it was a brother or a sister, but all he did was run to school. He used to tell all of his friends, and he was so excited. He couldn't wait for the day to have a little brother or sister running around with him. But there was one day I was there. I was meant to be having Sunday lunch with them. Charlie was still chatting away about his new brother or sister that was coming any minute now. And the parents were talking in the kitchen, and something had happened. My friend, she'd woken up, and something didn't feel right. She couldn't feel a heartbeat on her stomach. And they had to call the hospital, and they rushed over there, and I obviously was with Charlie. I said, oh, don't worry, I'll follow behind. And they got to the hospital. Doctor rushed out to see them, and I had Charlie on my lap, and I could see them through this window, and the doctor turned around to them, felt for a heartbeat, and said, I'm really sorry. There's nothing we can do. The baby's gone. And I saw this through his window, and I just knew then, that looked down at Charlie, that suddenly my life was about to change, and their life. More importantly, the life of this 5-year-old. How do you tell and explain something like that to a 5-year-old? Sometimes it helps to tell stories like this, because what happens is I've released a chemical in your brain, and you've really warmed to the story, and it helps me to tell a story. And if you ever have situations like this where you can tell a story that's got emotion to it, you will really warm and get the empathy from the person that's listening to you. So it really is the most beautiful emotion of all sometimes. Higher levels of oxytocin, you can have a beautiful time bonding with the person that you're talking to. So, now, finally, endorphins. On a happier note, I've got a video I want to show you, and this is all about how endorphins can release happiness. So let's watch the video. Now, that was a very successful example of actually an advertiser, as you saw at the end. It was Coca-Cola. They made a commercial in Belgium, and it was meant to be just an internet campaign, and as you saw, there was a guy on the subway, and he starts uncontrollably laughing. And before you know it, he starts releasing the endorphins of everybody in that carriage with him. And as you saw, none of it was staged. Every person in that advert was real. And the advertiser did a very clever thing. They released endorphins, not only in the people in the carriage, but everyone that watched that commercial. And ultimately, like I've said before, the powerful tool of happiness and laughter, people remembered Coca-Cola. And if you saw, they gave out little cards with little smiley faces. Whether you love or hate Coke, you would actually remember Coca-Cola. And you'll probably remember this story and tell it to someone else. So, I've explained to you the butterfly potion. These 3 beautiful hormones. The opposite of that is what I call the devil's potion. Now, that's where high levels of cortisone and adrenaline flow through this. And it actually happens to all of us. We have this in us. So if I were to scream now, see what it does to you. Sorry about that. But what I did was I just released high levels of cortisone and adrenaline into your bodies. And notice what it did to you. I gave you a shock. Your heartbeat's raised. You weren't really engaging with me anymore. You actually became a bit frustrated. You were irritable, uncreative. You became critical. You didn't like me for that split second. But that's because I gave you these emotions. And ask yourself a question. Do you think this is a healthy way to engage with someone? Whether it's a presentation, whether it's you're going for an interview, whether you're just talking to people in a room. You don't want to release that emotion in people because it can give you a negative result. So I tell people when I'm presenting to them to always have a meeting and make sure that you're carrying a good story. And I was mentored by a gentleman called Dr. Richard Bandler, who created neuro-linguistic programming. It's how our mind works, how we process information. And I believe that a brilliant story, it can literally change everything that you're telling to the audience. And what I tell people is you can achieve anything by approaching a situation in a different way. Now it starts like this. There's three things. The first thing is you don't need to be a great storyteller. You know, you have that image in your head of that man with the reading the book in a very deep voice. You don't need to be like that. You just need to engage and have a really beautiful story. Second thing I'm going to ask you is have a think about it, because people don't think they can do it. People don't think they can storytell. If you sat down and just thought for a minute, think about 3 or 4 stories about something amazing that's happened in your life. I bet you would have 3 or 4 different stories than you thought you could. And number 3, index the story. Which stories are going to release which emotion? Which story will release endorphins? Which one's oxytocin? Just find the story and pick the story that releases the right emotion for the situation that you are entering into. And I guarantee you, you will get the most beautiful desired results. Now, I'd like to round off with one last point. We all love a PowerPoint presentation, don't we? We either have it in a lecture, we either see it when we're trying to sell something to people. But let me just check something with you. 10,000 years ago, going back to when we were cavemen and women, how do you think they told stories? Now, that old fight and flight response with the guy with the baton and the mammal, those stories were told from generation to generation of how we have that fear factor. But then, 27,000 years ago, we transferred the knowledge. The cave people started writing on caves. And that information was transferred from generation to generation. Then 3,500 years ago, things changed. It started to move to text. Journals, novels, all of history that we've found is written down in some kind of form, and it's a story. It's a story that we have told from generation to generation. And funny enough, 30 years ago, PowerPoint was made. And we're looking at presentations on a PowerPoint slide, like that. Which one do you think our brains are adapted to the most? And which one do you think is the best form of storytelling? Thank you.